Hello and welcome back to the Metropolitan Culture Corner. My name is Tori Sparks. If this is your first time with us, welcome, bienvenido, bienvenida. If you are a returning customer, so to speak, thank you for following what we do here on the Metropolitan Culture Corner, where once a month we go behind the scenes with one of the fascinating figures from the local world of art and culture. This month, we go behind the scenes with documentary filmmaker, television director, producer, editor, cameraman, and much more, Marcel Llorens. Born in Barcelona, Marcel's love of all things cinema was sparked by watching old movies with his father. He went on to study audiovisual communication at the Universitat Autonoma de Barcelona and later at the Institut Ramon Llull. Then he worked as a freelancer on publicity shoots for companies such as Levi's, HP, Samsung, Puma, Ticketmaster, Nokia, Garmin, and many others. He would later work as a cameraman and editor for various television programs for TV3, for Interzona TV, for Movistar Plus, but he discovered his true calling when he started directing and filming documentaries. Marcel's current project is a documentary about the iconic Mexican song La Llorona. This project has not only gained him international recognition even before it's been officially released. It just won the CaixaForum Plus and IN-EDIT Music Documentary Film Festival competition this past year. Congratulations. But this project also changed his life completely. Marcel now splits his time between Barcelona and Mexico City, where over the past 4 years he has worked on music videos for artists such as La Malinche, La Bruja de Texcoco, Antonio Hidalgo, and more, as well as a limited 3-part series for Mexican television station Canal 22, and of course his project La Llorona El Documental. Marcel and his family are also heavily involved with a nonprofit organization called Ni Una Menos, which works to raise awareness for the thousands of women who have been murdered or gone missing in Mexico. Please welcome Marcel Llorens to the Metropolitan Culture Corner. Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Metropolitan Culture Corner.
Thank you very much for inviting me from Mexico to Barcelona.
You were born in Barcelona.
Yeah, in the center of Barcelona. I'm from Alborn, and now I'm in Mexico City since 4 years ago.
Center of Barcelona to the center of Mexico, ole. There's a big difference between the two cities in terms of size, in terms of everything. But before we get into that, first Barcelona, you were here, you were born in Alborn, you studied audiovisual communication and film. What made you want to get into film in the first place, and specifically documentary film? Did something inspire you, or was it kind of a natural, organic thing that you fell into?
I've been always in love with cinema. I can remember when my dad, and maybe I was 7 or 8 years old, and we were watching adult movies, big stories, and not just for kids. Maybe Los Pájaros, the Hitchcock, no? Hitchcock movies and things like this. And I was in love, and he was always talking to me about, here they cut the shot and they start again there and things like this. So I was always in love with the cinema. But then when I started studying communication, I was not sure between journalism and communication, because I love to write also. I love to write, but I didn't love to write news. I love to write more creative, or things that I'm thinking, or things that I want people to know. So I started working in news there in Barcelona, and 2 years or 3 years later, I keep news and I started making television, like entertainment TV, short stories, interviews. And now I can see that what I love of everything is to know people, to know new people who is trying to say something new, or who is trying to explain their lives, to know different places and different people. That's why I think I'm now in Mexico, because I wanted to know more and more people, and I keep traveling and I keep interviewing people from other places, and now it's kind of hard to go back.
Basically, the passion for hearing people's stories ended up leading you into not only your job, but also your new home.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm always telling my wife here, she's Mexican, I always tell her, if I've been like 3, 4, 5 days without knowing anything new, not just people, but a restaurant or a bar, if I'm not knowing anything new, I'm kind of sad or anxious. So I need to go walking around and maybe just start talking with someone in the park or something to know something new.
That's very different than a lot of people who really want to stay within their bubble of comfort. It makes sense to me as a documentary filmmaker that that would be your way of seeing the world. I love that.
That's why the pandemic was so hard. I came here in February 2020. So 1 month later, it starts the pandemic here in Mexico. And I thought about going back to Barcelona, but the people from there who know me, they told me, you cannot be here in your flat watching TV and eating every day the same things because you're gonna get crazy. And I keep here in Mexico for that reason. Here, it was not forbidden to go away and walking around.
That's really interesting. So your whole life changed basically because Barcelona was on lockdown and Mexico City was not. Well, before you ended up in Mexico, as you mentioned, after studying, you worked as a program director in, for example, the program Hora Punta on Channel 1, on EDIT, other TV programs here in Catalonia, cameraman, editor. I mean, you've done all kinds of things in television before you started working on film. What did you learn from working within the world of TV that's later influenced how you approach making a longer film or a short film?
Basically, it's kind of the same. I learned a lot because when you're working on TV, you have to do short films. Not short because it's shorter, also because you have to do it in a lot less time than if you had a documentary or a film. So sometimes it's kind of the same, but faster. And this is a good way to learn because you have to do a lot of things. In some of the TV shows that I was working, I did everything. So I was looking for a story. I tell my boss, okay, do you like this story? Do you think we can start investigating it or something? Yeah, I think that one is good. Oh, it's okay. So I look for the people to tell the story. And then I traveled with a cameraman. I made the reels. So then when we went back to Barcelona, I was in the editing room. We did everything in this TV show. So you learn a lot. And then the big difference is that now I was trying to tell my stories, not my stories because it's the other people's stories, but my way, and trying to give something of me in the stories, the way you are questioning or interviewing the people, the way you look. Sometimes it's kind of impossible to be the audio guy, the cameraman, and the interviewing. Sometimes it's too much, but I love to do everything because then it's your thing, that it's film, documentary, or whatever you're doing, it's everything yours.
It's your baby in the end. Yeah.
Totally.
I saw that you put on your CV that one of the things you included was your ability to edit and work under pressure. So is that really important to be able to do good creative work, even though you are under a really, really specific time frame or you have to do everything all at once? Is that a skill that is necessary to do what you do, or it's just something that you happen to be good at?
If you're lucky and if you have time to do it quiet and you don't need to be under pressure, but I know a few people who is doing it with time, with giving the time to everything. Sometimes you have to decide, and when you are editing, sometimes the people thought that the editor is the guy who knows how the software works. The editor is one of the most important people in a film or in a TV show because finally he decides, or with the help of someone, the director, he's trying to decide how are you watching it. So the things that they're gonna be apart, or the first thing that you will have the impact. So this is always kind of stressful when you have to decide, you have to let something, you have been filming it, everything. I love that shot, but now I can see that here it's not working, so I'm gonna let it apart. And this is stressful if it's your thing. I was working in a production place where I was editing. In one day I had to have these best shots movies of motor races and things, so I had to decide very fast. And I think that was also a big learning to now with my work. I always decide the things with the time I have. Sometimes I can give more time to the decision, but sometimes it's okay, today is my last day to decide if this interview is going to the movie or not. So I have now 41 years old, and it's stressful for me to decide sometimes a lot of things. But then when you had the decision, you have to go on.
Every project you work on, like the one you just mentioned, teaches you something, and the experience teaches you something as well. But working in Spain and in Catalonia versus working in Mexico, what has that experience brought to you, or has it changed how you work?
That's a very good question because they have to tell me if they want me or not in a job, in a very big job. One of the things they want from me is to join this Catalan way, because it's a big enterprise from Catalonia, with the way to work here in Mexico. It's kind of hard to understand that sometimes the things are different here. It's a different country, so everything is different, but sometimes when you are speaking the same language, it looks like it will be easier to understand each other. But it's not just the language. A lot of things are different here. With work, I'm always telling the same example. You can go to a bar here and say to the barman, can I have a Coca-Cola? And he's gonna tell you, yeah, sure. Then 10 minutes later, please, where is my Coke? I asked you for a Coke. Okay, it's okay, but he doesn't give you the Coke. And half an hour later, you say to him, okay, it's okay if you don't have a Coke, but give me a beer or something. And he said, okay, we don't have Coke. I was trying to get one, but I could not, and I didn't know how to tell you. Sometimes there is like a fear to
conflict.
To the conflict. Exactly. And this is a very difficult thing when you are working, and it's difficult to understand it if you are from another country and you are working here and you need something from someone and you're telling him, okay, I want this shot. And then when you are editing, you said, this is not the shot that I wanted, and he didn't tell me that he could not or something. So this is one of the things I am trying to go in and understand. And
you're like the translator, the cultural translator almost, yeah.
Totally. It's an important translation. I can understand the language, but sometimes I cannot understand the people.
In Mexico, working in the world of film and television, sometimes you run into this conflict-averse situation where people don't want to say no, but they don't know how to tell you. So how would you characterize working in Catalonia? If you had to explain it to someone Mexican, what would you tell them?
Not just work with everyone. They say always that the Spanish, but also the Catalan as a different people, we speak very direct and we speak without filters, So they see that thing as a brusco, duro,
aggressive, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, aggressive. It's happening to me every day, I'm telling my wife, okay, can you give me, well, but can you just tell it more softly? And but I was not being aggressive. It's my way to say things, and that's the same in work. You have to be more soft and trying to, hi, hola, buenos días, ¿cómo estás? And that's kind of difficult for us. We want to, anar per feina, se dice en Catalan. In Catalan, it's work. Fast.
It's just interesting to hear the difference from someone who's lived in both places. But speaking of Mexican culture, I believe before you moved to Mexico, a few years before the pandemic even started, you started this documentary about a very, very Mexican song, La Llorona. And I would say that's the most famous song ever to have come out of the country. It's 100 years old. There are hundreds of verses. And in it, you interview all kinds of people. You got famous singers, Grammy winners, independent artists, actors, producers, historians, musicologists, street musicians, journalists, activists. So all these people, many of them from Mexico, some not. What led you to start this massive project around this one particular song that's so iconic when it comes to Mexican culture? Now you live in Mexico, now you know the people, now you know the culture, but this is before that.
It was kind of crazy because I was just finishing a TV show in Barcelona and I was thinking about doing something for myself. I didn't know about the song. I had a project with some friends. We had a ship that was not working and we were doing some activities to have money, arreglar the ship. But there were a lot of magic moments about this song. I was always thinking, I don't know exactly what it's about. I feel something about this song, but I don't know what it's about and what is telling to me this song. So I started doing some interviews in Barcelona. The first of these interviews was with you, and it was kind of magic. It was kind of magical because it was my first contact with half Mexican people abroad, because you were talking about Mexico with a love and with a feeling that it was one of the things that makes me decide to go to Mexico. I traveled to Mexico like 15 years ago, and then 2019 I was there traveling around. So when I was in Barcelona just interviewing people with that love for the song, but also for the Mexican culture, I decided to come here and to try to ask the people what the song was about. My idea was film people singing La Llorona and then asking them about what were they singing to, and it was the beginning. So 1 month later the pandemic arrives here in Mexico and there was no live shows, there was no concerts, so I keep trying to interview people around Zooms and in the street and taking pictures and filming what I could film. And like 6 months later, I could interview some of the best singers here in Mexico: Eugenia León, Rubén Albarrán, Ángel Aguilar, Astrid Haddad, people that sometimes we Catalan people or Spanish people maybe feel that we know them, but they are not so well known there. But here they are stars. They cannot stay in the street without a lot of people talking to them. It was crazy because a lot of people told me, how did you get to them? How could you interview them? They weren't, no eran estrellas para mí. I was not shocked by they were stars. I just tried to get them by Instagram or by a phone that someone told me that maybe I could try to. And like 90% of the people were very open to talk about La Llorona. It was very magical because they told me, okay, I'm not doing interviews, and during the pandemics, it's kind of hard to me to open my place to someone. But if you want to talk, a guy from Barcelona making a documentary about La Llorona, they were also surprised and happy to see that someone was trying to tell something about a song that everyone knows here, but not so many people have been focused to understand it. So 8 months or 9 months later, I had a lot of interviews and a lot of different moments from Mexico, and trying to understand that La Llorona is talking about a Mexican way to live. 4 years later, I'm half Mexican and I have a wife and a daughter, Mexican daughter. So La Llorona was a very life-changing thing that I did 4 years ago. And now I think if it's not this year, it's going to be next year for sure. We are a punto de sacarla, no? That the people can watch it.
It's almost finished, finally. Once it's released, it'll have been 5 years that you've been living with this song, you know, and as you mentioned, all these people have recorded their versions of it. Of course, most people knew the version of Chavela Vargas, but after having spoken to so many people who love this song and who've worked and lived in this song as performers, how does the feeling behind the song or the meaning behind the song, how has that changed for you, aside from the fact that it brought you to change countries, have a wife and a daughter? Not a small thing, but just in terms of the song itself and what the documentary itself has brought to your life, how has it helped you connect with Mexican culture and music in general?
It's a lot of things, but I try to explain that I think the people here in Mexico, not all the people, but mostly, they live intensamente, deeply. They are living every day as if it was not last day, but if it was a very important thing. Sometimes I think maybe they're in Barcelona or maybe in the first world, maybe in the most advanced countries, we don't have this feeling about every day is so important. And that's why now meditation and yoga and I think it's being so important for a lot of people, because we have to be conscious that living every day it's to be lucky. And after the pandemic, people, okay, now we are to be every day going to the school, to my work. A lot of people died during the pandemic and we could see that it was important, but we forget it very fast. And I think here in Mexico, I could see like the song is talking about very important things as a metaphor. A lot of people is singing to death. You know that here in Mexico, they have a relation with death, sometimes closer than we have it there in Spain or in Barcelona.
Dia de los Muertos and the Day of the Dead in Mexico is a huge part of the culture, which is not necessarily a sad occasion. It's colorful and it's people celebrating the past and it's keeping their ancestors alive. Do you feel like that aspect of the culture is one reason why a song like La Llorona is so important?
It's one of the things. For sure, it's important for a lot of people, but it's not a thing that you can feel it in the city, you know? But it's a true that you can feel that here the people it's more connected with the dead. And my wife have a son, 9 years old, and we've been in cemeteries for that day, the Dia de Muertos, and we did our altar with the pictures of grandmas and grandpas, and we were talking a lot with him about it. I think it's not the same thing we do there in Spain. We usually forget the people, but it's not the only thing. You know, I could see interviewing people that this is one of the things that they mostly talk about when they sing La Llorona, but also the La Feminidad, or it's telling La Feminidad that everyone has inside.
Like the feminine side of everybody.
The thing is, we all have masculine and feminine parts inside, and it's not about the gender. So I think here the situation about the feminism is still very hard because a lot of women are killed every day. And now it's like 20 women are killed every day here in Mexico.
In your documentary, the trailer, at least, which I've seen, starts out with these interviews and people talking about the song, and then it fades into these images of violence and protests and all these people who are missing their daughters, their wives, their sisters. I know that you and your wife and your family are involved with activism through Ni Una Menos. Did the song lead you to become more interested in this situation that's happening in your new country? How did that become part of the project?
It was very, very, very organic. It is a reality here. There is a lot of violence, you know, and for sure it's everywhere in the world, but here it's más duro, more strong, more hard with women. The other day I saw Mexico was the second country in the world with more violence in general, and people killed. So this is one of the things that I had in front when I was interviewing people about La Llorona. And then my wife is working with a lot of women who have lost their daughters and mothers. I've been with her just trying to help, trying to interview some people that they want to talk about it. And it's one of the things that make me stressed about having a daughter here in Mexico. It's hard to be a woman around the world, but here it's harder. You have more options to be killed, to be kidnapped. So I didn't thought about filming about this when I was trying to make my script about La Llorona, but then I could not avoid it because it's part of it. And a lot of people who is singing La Llorona, they are singing it also with this, con este peso en el corazón, with this hard feeling in their heart. So I interviewed at least 2-3 women who had their daughters killed, and they are still trying to make the justice of Mexico do something. And also there is a girl who I knew that she plays saxophone, and ex-boyfriend, when she left him, he
I read about on your Facebook page, threw acid in her face.
Throw acid to her face. There is a new law here in Mexico to say that this is not just an aggression, it's more than this. It's a new law with her name. And I had an interview with her also in Oaxaca, in a very small village, 3 hours from the city of Oaxaca. It was also life-changing to be there in the small village, talking with her, just walking around and being conscious of the reality of a lot of people who is women here in Mexico. But also the thing is, she was almost killed also because she was musician, and for that guy to be a musician here in Mexico, being woman, it was a bad thing because she was as una puta por ser música.
Is that a common thing that women in Mexico are seen as exposing yourself unnecessarily? Are women musicians in more danger than in other places in the world in your experience?
I think not everywhere here in Mexico. Of course, there is a lot of women making music and a very famous music women, but it's everywhere. I was 2 weeks ago in La Marcha del 8M, no? The feminist
the protest or the march on the 8th of March?
The women who are in the march, they don't want the men to be there because it's still a shock. They don't feel sure if there is men around. It's still a reality here.
So it wasn't so much about wanting to include this subject in the documentary, it's just that it had to be there because it was such a part of the reality of these women's lives.
Maria Elena Rios is this saxophonist, and I text her during the pandemic and I told her, I'm making a documentary about La Llorona and I would like to interview you. And she told me, no, sorry, I'm not okay, I'm not feeling well about it, about everything, but I don't want to be interviewed, and I'm sorry, but no. And I think it was 1 month later or 5 or 6 weeks later, she called me in the middle of the night and she told me, okay, I'm shocked right now, I cannot sleep. I was listening La Llorona. I played thousands of times in my village with the band, but I was never just trying to understand what it was talking about. And now I can see it's talking about me. This song, some of these lyrics are speaking direct to me and they are talking about my life, and I wanted to tell it to you in your interview. So come to my village, 8 or 9 hours from the city, and we are okay making this interview. And it was a very, very, very intense moment and an interview.
I can imagine. But it seemed like through La Llorona, she's able to find some kind of connection, some kind of catharsis. I know also you've worked with La Catrina sound system and they made this kind of protest song version of La Llorona. Do you feel like with this song in particular, or just music in general, for Mexico is kind of a way of healing itself?
I think the music, it's been always one of the most used thing to explain yourself, or to cry when you are sad, or to break with a feeling that you cannot keep out from you. But still La Llorona has one more, un paso más. La Llorona, I think sometimes help you to clear your feelings without knowing what are you saying. It's like this kind of chords to everybody is saying, okay, you have feelings, you have something to say, and you have something to express of your feelings with this song. And I think La Llorona, it's like that it's no está racionalizado. It's something down in your thoughts. It's something about your feelings.
It's more subconscious. It's not so much of a conscious understanding. Yeah. You've dedicated so much time to this incredible project. Really, thank you for sharing your insights, your story. I don't know. The problem with these interviews for me is that I could just have them go on for like 4 hours, but I know that we can't. So really, thank you so much. And I'm so excited for you that this documentary will finally be finished. And I can't wait to see it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marcel, for taking the time to talk to us here on the Metropolitan Culture Corner. On a personal note, it was such a pleasure to interview Marcel because he is also a personal friend. Marcel and I met when he actually interviewed me for his documentary, La Llorona. So if you do have the opportunity to see the film and you see me in it, don't be surprised. I had the good luck to be one of the few who's seen the trailer for the documentary. And even though I am just a small part of it, I am so proud to have been involved in this project. The trailer brought tears to my eyes. It is beautiful, it is profound, it's an incredible project. So I highly recommend that you check out the documentary La Llorona by Marcel Llorens when it does come out. And as always, thank you for tuning in to the Metropolitan Culture Corner. Thank you for supporting local art and culture, for being interested in what we do here, for being interested in hearing the stories behind the art, behind the film, behind the music, behind the scenes with these incredible people who inspire us every day.
Todos me dicen el negro, Llorona, negro, pero cariñoso.